Hello and welcome to Talking Bottom. I'm Paul Tanter.
I'm Matt Brooks.
And I'm Ange Pearson.
And it's the latest in our new series, The Many Faces of Rik Mayall, where each week we look at one of Rik's iconic characters that we all remember him for so well. This week, it's Filthy Rich and Catflap, a sitcom that showed on the BBC in 1987, written by Ben Elton, starred Rik Mayall, Adrian Edmondson and Nigel Planer. Only ran for 6 episodes, that's one series, and it went out between January and February 1987. The show follows Richie Rich, played by Rik Mayall, a delusional, egotistical, washed-up TV star obsessed with fame and terrified of assassination. Eddie Catflap, played by Adrian Edmondson, his violent, hard-drinking minder, and Ralph Filthy, played by Nigel Planer, Richie's grotesquely sleazy showbiz agent. It satirises the entertainment industry, celebrity culture, daytime TV, and the declining British variety circuit, all through the lens of anarchic, cartoonish violence and surrealism. Now, in terms of its place at the time, it's the people behind the young ones moving on and trying something different. There's 2 interesting ways of looking at this. One is in its place at the time, and another is in its historical context as a sort of transitory show between the young ones and Bottom. But obviously, when people were watching it at the time, Bottom wasn't on.
Yes, that's right. All the bad things I think about it is that it's not Bottom, but they wouldn't think that when they're watching it, are
Yeah,
they?
precisely. I think there were quite a few people who we've seen commenting on social media, saying, do a Catflap book. We love Catflap.
A book?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
I've seen.
wow,
There's been a couple of people who've
That's
said
for
do
Jeffers to
Catflap
do, I
next.
think. No,
Yeah,
they're not.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Podcasto, Catflapo by Jeffers. Like, there's a lot of love for Filthy Rich and Catflap. I didn't come to the show until much later.
Same.
I honestly didn't watch Catflap until maybe, 20 years ago at the earliest, because I definitely was aware of Richie Rich, and I'd seen, obviously, Nigel Planer's brilliant Filthy, and I'd definitely seen that there was that. It's Richie and Ade.
How had you seen it? Because it was this fictitious thing for me.
It was available on VHS. There was a double VHS box set before the DVD. I'm not sure when it was released. I had that. I remember I bought it and for ages didn't watch it because
Why?
I think I'd seen like clips of it and I thought, once I watch it, I'll either know if it's good or not, and if it's not good, I'll be disappointed.
You know what that makes me think of?
It's Schrodinger's video
Desmond from Lost. He had this weird thing of he saved the last Charles Dickens book.
Yeah,
and
our mutual friend. Our mutual friend. It was the thing he was going to read before he dies. Yeah.
The thing is, I definitely, when I watched the DVD, as you said, Matt, the problem with the benefit of hindsight is that you're I found myself, I don't know if I speak for anybody else listening out there, but I constantly found myself comparing Richie and Ade
exactly
to Richie and Ade,
what was yet to come.
Yeah.
And for me, the Catflap Richie and Ade, they are brilliant because it is there. It's absolutely there. Their relationship, the violence, the drinking from it. I mean, Eddie is almost pretty much
I think so.
fully
I
formed as Eddie,
agree with that. Yeah.
But the Richie Rich character, which obviously we'll talk about and go into, doesn't quite, for me, hit the same mark of laughter, warmth. He's just not as funny to me as Richard Rich.
Annoying, but purposely, right? The character's meant to be annoying, but that's a hard line to skirt to actually not be just annoying.
I think looking at it from and I hate to use this phrase, historical perspective, because that makes me feel incredibly fucking old.
No, but it is though, isn't it?
It is like a transitory show between the Young Ones and Bottom. Young Ones was written by Ben Elton and Rik Mayall and Lisa Mayer. This one is just written by Ben Elton, but it's got 3 of the young ones in it.
And it does have additional material from Rik Mayall.
And in the course of my little bit of research into this, it seemed like this show may have been the source of a bit of friction between Rik and Ben. It's telling that they never, apart from Rik and Ade appearing on Blackadder, they never worked together again. They never did a show together again after this. I believe there was a bit of, like, Rik was, I've got a quote somewhere about Rik said something like, Ben wrote the show, I would have happily written it with him if he'd asked me to, but he never did.
So he actually wanted control over it, Ben Elton. Yeah. And you can see and hear every inch of Ben Elton's writing in every episode.
It's incredibly political, this lefty stuff. Like Richie saying that very famous line, if you don't like the police, go and call a stand-up comedian or something.
Yeah. I mean, you can see in this, the writing, it's quite satirical. It's sort of a sideswiper, entertainment, and that kind of thing. And a lot of, I think what was probably ended up being a lot of Rik and Ade's contributions were where they added their bits of violence and toilet humour and kill more milkmen and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you know, I really didn't think works. The thing that I think is the weakest of this is the constant mugging to the camera and the breaking of the fourth wall. It's so much that it's like there's this gag going on that we're not in on, you know, and I feel so excluded by
Well, the thing is, I think we are invited in on it. I think for me, I was rewatching it and I was trying to figure out, because this is Richie and Eddie in their, you know, we will talk about on Jolly, like Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door, that sort of prototype for bottom in these characters, because the characters of Richie and Eddie have Rik and Ade running through the heart of them. Of course they do, because they're performing them and they're bringing them to life. There are so many lines in Catflap that feel very bottom. And that, I mean, even there's one like that he's mentioned gutter snipe. At one point, there's little bits, and when you are a bottom fan, as we three are, you can't help but just notice those little nuggets and think they're the best bits for me when you see flashes of bottom happening. And it doesn't really happen until episode 5 for me that you see proper Richie and Eddie style back and forth between them.
In terms of when people would have been watching this at the time, people would have known who Rik and Ade were and Ben Elton were. The Young Ones was massive on TV. I look at it in the trajectory of their career a bit like the same way that you can see the trajectory of The Office and Extras with Merchant and Gervais.
Incredibly similar, isn't it?
Yeah, in the, you know, people always say write about what you know. Young Ones was about student life. Ben Elton was only 6 months out of uni when he wrote it. Office, same for Gervais and Merchant.
Well, they weren't 6 months out of uni.
The Office was they had been basing it out of their office life.
Yes.
And so then you've got their entry into the world of entertainment, fame, being surrounded by famous actors, working in TV, that kind of thing. And Filthy Rich and Catflap is very much a satirical look at their entry into the world of light entertainment.
Yeah,
you know,
if it
being
got
able
wrong
to
for him, if he'd become a has-been, if he'd only had the little one bit of TV and milked that forever. This is Rik Mayall, like the bad universe, you know.
The thing is, it's Richie Rich. It isn't Rik at all, this character, you know? I think that I was trying to get to the heart of what it is about the premise, the dynamic that doesn't quite marry up for me and make it the hilarious show that it really could be, because there are some really wonderful lines. There's some great, ridiculous plots that happen. That it's early on where they're in the BBC club, isn't it, in the Nolans episode?
Yeah.
And then later on they're back and it's like all the debauchery that's happening. And
I
it's
like
just
that they don't let them sing, and then they do sing.
Oh yeah,
it's
it's
nice.
great. But they're similar to the to what you were saying, Paul, about extras. You know, they kind of get they get these famous people in to act and play a part of themselves.
Mid-year as well.
But mid-year, which is brilliant in the last episode. But what it doesn't quite hit is some sort of, I was trying to put my finger on what it is that I don't like about it. And you can't just say, oh, it's not funny, because there are bits in it that are very, very funny. But overall, I was trying to boil down what it is about the dynamic and also the look of the show. And I just want to mention, I think the thing that works with Bottom and the Young Ones is the grime, right?
Yeah.
In Filthy Rich and Catflap, they look hideously filthy. Filthy looks hideously filthy. He's covered in stains. So does Eddie the Minder a lot of the time.
Excellent comb over as well.
But Richie Rich is always impeccably dressed, pretty much, isn't he? And he's living in this, you know, quote unquote penthouse apartment that doesn't actually make any sense for him to be living in if he's not working and he's got no means to be living in that way. And also, I know they're doing it through this kind of, they're having a go at light entertainment through a sort of, I think it doesn't really know what it wants to say. We're saying satirical, but what do they actually say about it? They're kind of mentioning Tarby but it doesn't actually land.
I agree. I think it's tonally quite all over the place.
Yeah.
So like it's more narrative than the Young Ones. It doesn't have these surreal bits like the Young Ones have, but it does have, as you said, mugging to camera, a lot of these sort of asides, that sort of thing. It tries to, I don't know, it's like you can see where Rik and Ade are trying to get in a bit of violence and that kind of thing, but it's not quite sure what it wants to be. It might have been if they'd commissioned another series, it might have been series 2, things sort of smooth in and everything gels.
Even the violence doesn't play well. You know the bit where obviously Eddie gets the fire axe and he
into him, and he doesn't take any pain from it. It's strange, isn't it?
It's not. There's no consequences to
it's
that.
It's like he knows he's in a show and he's not playing by the rules that Eddie is.
When Richie kills the first milkman by smashing the milk over his head. He kicks him several times. No sound effects.
Yeah,
or that
feels very strange, isn't
it? And you think, considering the episodes were either directed by Ed By or Paul Jackson, I think they took ones each.
Ed just did the outside stuff.
Okay. Oh, it's the same thing as the Young Ones, right? Okay. Yeah. You'd think they would have taken that over from the Young Ones, but maybe that was a thing of Ben Elton saying, "No, I don't want any in-house sound effects or anything like that."
It does feel like Ben Elton's more in charge. He literally is. He's just the sole
And obviously Paul
writing credit.
Jackson was at the helm. He'd been at the helm for the Young Ones, and the violence in the Young Ones plays spectacularly well with hilarious sound effects. It's faultless in the Young Ones and then in Bottom, but there's just something that doesn't quite gel in Catflap.
One of the things that really gripes me is when they will abandon a plot point and kind of joke about it, like, "Oh, we ran out of, or I didn't write any more of that script, or I've got no punchline. Haha, isn't that funny?" Like, no, that isn't funny. You should have finished the fucking punchline, the joke. That's your job, and that, I don't find that charming.
The self-aware part of it isn't particularly something that lands a great laugh.
I was right.
We shouldn't get too negative, I think.
Doing that, no. We can be honest. I think doing that kind of that ending of a scene or a sketch is something that everyone who's trying out sketch writing at university will go through. They'll have one where it'll be like, "We couldn't think of a name to this," so therefore
Python, isn't it?
It is Python. Yeah, it's almost like having an announcer coming on saying, "We're very sorry about the poor quality of that sketch."
But in Python, it really, really fucking works. It's hilarious.
Is that because they were the first ones to do it, and therefore they just by dint of being the first, they managed to get the joke in, and then after that,
but I think it's what you said earlier about tone. And I think in Filthy Rich and Catflap, and we don't want to be too negative because we're aware there'll be people out there who love Catflap, right? And we welcome you telling us exactly where it is that we're wrong, want to talk about this, because it's why we wanted to do the Rik Mayall series, to talk about all his amazingly different gamut of characters that he did over the years, right? And the thing that really frustrates me when I watch Richie Rich in Catflap is that Rik is giving a fantastic performance, as always. So is Ade, and so is Nigel. And so why doesn't it quite work overall? And it's the same, I think I've mentioned it on a previous podcast. It's the same problem that Blackadder Series 1 had. I've been trying to wrangle with it with myself. It's like all of the elements should be there, and it should be just this brilliant show that I love to watch over and over again. But Blackadder 1 I can't go back to a lot because it just, the dynamic in that show does not play for me. It doesn't make me laugh. I end up feeling just a bit like, oh, that could have been so much better. And that's what frustrates me about watching Catflap, because I love watching Rik, of course I do, but it's just a bit not funny. I hate saying it.
When you say Blackadder, obviously there's the Ben Elton link there, and I can't help think of the Prince Regent with as a comparison to Richie Rich. There's something like this boy prince, like this, his hair, that where they sort of shave at the back, and like that kind of weird bob type thing.
The weird shaving at the back is odd, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's not like a reason why it's a problem or anything. It's just a bit odd, and it's not particularly funny.
I suppose just to show that the character's an idiot and doesn't really know how to present himself.
He's trying to have his own look. He's trying to put himself forward, have a different look, be memorable, right? And that's what so many light entertainers are trying to do, right? They're trying to be memorable in some way and get their own style. And I mean, his style leaps out of every costume that he has, every single episode.
Puffy shirt things and
he's flamboyant. He's confident,
and he isn't a virgin. I think he's probably had some stuff. It's sort of hinted at, but it's not flat out. It's not canon that he's not had any action
that's
at all.
What I wanted to touch upon. I think the problem as well with Richie Rich as a comedy character is that we're meant to believe that he's this failure, has been, he's got no money, he's not succeeding. But then actually he does get these parts on, sounds a bit rude. He ruins it for himself. And that to me is the satire that
for some reason
Ben does the best.
Yeah, for some reason that journalist, head of a newspaper, is Australian or something. So I can't think why on earth that would be, if that's been a reference.
Well, I mean,
joking, obviously it's Murdoch, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't say for sure, but it's obviously Murdoch. Yeah. But I mean, there's so many of those characters that you will meet and still meet in journalism in that old school, hardened way. Where I mean, just brilliant. Where it's like the first rule of journalism: lie. So many brilliant things in there, and the idea that Richie is obviously he can't work through entertainment, so the next best thing for him is to become a gossip.
The most jarring episode of the series. It feels like, what if instead of them being actors, they became journalists? And huh?
Well, no, it's the only thing open to him because he's
I know that's what they've written, but it seems quite forced.
Well, I mean, I guess I know. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It is, and I think that's the problem with a lot of the Catflap plots. Like they do feel fairly kind of forced or edged in, or actually just too much is happening, too much is going on. And when you watch Ben Elton stand up, he's scattergun with his delivery. You can tell Ben is the kind of person who's so prolific, isn't he, as a writer? He wants to get so many ideas down on the page. I think him writing on his own is something that doesn't necessarily always spin gold.
He does bounce ideas off people well.
And
I think
I
he
would
works well with others.
love to interview Ben Elton. I would love to ask him
So
about.
maybe we should start slagging off his
No,
baby.
Yeah, but I'd love to ask him about it. And we have mentioned as well about at Slapstick Fest, Ben said that whenever he saw Rik would want to put on Filthy Rich and Catflap and
But
watch it.
that's before Bottom exists, though.
Well, we
right?
don't know. He didn't specify when in Rik's life and their friendship that was what Rik was doing. And I think I hypothesised that maybe Rik wanted to work with him again. So I don't know whether they fell out.
Well, Rik did say that he would have written on it if Ben had asked him, but Ben is still a show that he's proud of. In 2000, he was doing a Guardian web chat, and someone asked him this fairly shitty question, I think, but he handled it well. He said, "Do you get embarrassed when people mention previous work of yours which you hoped had been forgotten by all and sundry? By the way, any chance of another series of Filthy Rich and Catflap?" Which I feel like
fuck off.
Oh,
Yeah. So Ben Elton, he said, "I have to say, we all loved Filthy Rich and Catflap. The critics loathed it, but the BBC were happy to go with it again. I don't know what got in the way. Booze, babies, and hair loss, probably. That might have been
Eddie?
Ade, I think. But Filthy Rich and Catflap is about horrible old blokes, so maybe we just grew into the project."
Interesting. But that's the thing, that it's not in any way a show that I think anyone should be embarrassed about. I enjoy watching it, but I don't rewatch
The
it.
DNA of Bottoms throughout. Isn't it? You can. If you couldn't see it, you're an idiot. You're blind.
I love watching it. And, obviously Lee Corns is in it as the bin man in the first episode. Helen Leder is in there as the nurse.
There's a lot of like cameos from our favourite comedy actors from the through the 80s. Seeing like Chris Barry in there, and
do you know he's playing
an angry director?
Yeah, who is Paul Jackson?
Yeah.
Close up on the plane.
Yeah, go over to the has-beens, darling. All that. Yeah,
now,
great.
That show in that particular episode, I think. Now we talked about the satire of Filthy Rich and Catflap. That show.
What you mean? That episode 2 you're talking about?
Sounds a bit rude.
2.
Oh, the show within the show you're talking about, or the actual episode?
The show sounds a bit rude.
Yeah.
In episode 2, I think is a great sideswipe at all of those performers, that ilk of performers that we grew up watching through light entertainment, such as the camp guy who will go, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit queer," or the Mrs. Slocum type who's always going on about her pussy. I love the way by the end of that they're all crowding, trying to fight their way to the camera so they can all get their tired cliche catchphrases out. Like there's a good spoof of like Rod Hull Emu there, isn't there?
Yeah,
and Harry Enfield
he's moving his lips even though he doesn't need to say anything.
Harry Enfield, Harry as the put upon floor manager. There's this little thing, like, by the way, it's not part of the scene in any way, but when he turns around, his arse is hanging out of his trousers.
This is bloody brilliant.
That's got to be an early Harry Enfield, right?
I mean, this was 87, so I don't think Saturday Live had been on TV yet, and because he broke through with loads of money. Yeah.
Wasn't Saturday Live more like 85?
Oh, I don't know. Well,
it rhymes, so it must be.
I'm pretty sure it was around 85 that Saturday Live was, because that's Dangerous Brothers territory.
Right, okay.
So it was, it predate that.
Episode 3, dinner party. Richie tries to host a dinner party. They try and get some food. They steal it, and then turns out no one's come because he hadn't sent out the invitations. I love
that one. It's a little bit, again, going back to Bottom, it's like the Queen's coming round. Yeah. He's having
it's actually quite nice that he did invite Catflap and Filthy.
Oh, they're his only friends, though, aren't they? I love that he's written on the chairs.
Said, no, you can't come.
I love that it's written on the chairs who it is that's coming. And obviously Tarby, the ethereal Tarby that we obviously know he doesn't really actually is friends with.
Maybe that's a good example of the kind of difference between Ben Elton's writing and Rik Mayall's writing and Adrian Edmondson's writing, that Ben Elton would have him invite the characters, whereas Rik and Ade would go, no, he's not going to invite them, even though they're his only two friends.
Episode 4, A Death in the Family. Richie finds out his dad is dying and they can make a good advert from this, so he tries to make that happen, and his dad starts getting better, so he plots to murder him.
Yeah, brilliant with the rat poison and everything, isn't it? And then, are we touching upon the plots and things in each of these episodes as we go through them? Because there is, they end up in the gay pub, don't they? And I love that it's Brian Croucher, Harry the Bastard, who's the landlord, isn't it? And then it turns out it is a gay pub.
And he throws about, don't come back until you liberate your sexual identity politics or
Exactly,
something.
yeah, because it is because there are a
Feels
lot
very
of
Ben Elton.
homophobic
Yeah.
lines within that, so it is important that they obviously said, this isn't how we actually feel about it, but there are these attitudes that exist, right? And throughout Rik and Ade's work, there is always, like, we talked about it in the Blackadder pod, with the what a puff and all that. Like in the 80s, it was a punchline that people did go to quite often.
I mean, they use it in the what's the game show called again?
It's a bit word. I feel a bit queer.
Sounds a bit rude.
Yeah,
they use it in Sounds a Bit Rude, don't they? Because like Richie is actually quite horrific to that gay guy.
Like, get out of here, you.
Yeah, and he is horrific, and that's the thing where it's like he's a horrible character, and he should get a proper comeuppance for all of these things that he does. But actually,
he just gets a punch and then he's fine.
Yeah, and I know with Richie, a lot of the time he's really awful to people, and he doesn't necessarily get a proper comeuppance. But there's something about the heart of Richie that makes you sympathise with him, and I think that's the thing. You don't really sympathise with Richie Rich.
You're right. There's nothing about him that's sympathetic. There's nothing about him that makes you go, "I quite like this guy," that redeems him. With Richie, you feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
With Alan Bastard, he's charming. With Flashart, he's a hero.
Kevin Turvey, he's lovable loser.
He's naive. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. With Richie Rich, there's no redeeming quality.
He's the most unlikable character, even at the point, though. Do you want to carry on with this
that's the problem with why the comedy doesn't quite land for me, and it really upsets me because I want to love every single thing about Richie Rich, because Rik does give a great performance, but actually there's just something that makes you not particularly engage.
Yeah,
I think all three of them are wisecrackers, aren't they? So this goes to what I was talking about earlier about how like there's no one who is the real punching bag of the group.
Yeah, that bit right at the end.
All of them have the potential for being the smartest guy in the room. Which actually, if you put Richie and Eddie together, both of them are the dumbest guy in the room. If that makes sense.
Right at the end, when they're sat on the sofa about to watch TV and they start slapping each other, or reaching over each other.
Yeah.
It is like they're fighting for dominance, the three of them.
Yeah,
which one's the leader there? Don't know.
I think we've worked it through in our in this discussion, and it's been something that I've obviously considered but not properly sat down and chatted about until now. And I think you're right, it's the status. It's definitely about power dynamics is such an important part of any sitcom. And the power dynamic changes constantly in Filthy Rich and Catflap. By the end, obviously, Filthy's in a prison cell, isn't he? And he's completely low, and they don't give a shit about it.
They're like laughing at his execution, aren't they? Like, literally killing.
Them laughing at his execution is a little bit like Eddie and Spudgun and Hedgehog, like drunkenly appearing at the door when Richie's broken his legs coming down the stairs and cackling away at it. There's not too much dissimilarity with that sort of level of
but again,
of feeling.
Richie's the one who is like the lower status, isn't he? In amongst Eddie and his mates, and you're with them when you're laughing at him because
and also he thinks he's higher status, but he's not, which is a good.
And he spent the first part of the episode bossing them all around and fully deserving the comeuppance that he's got. He's been absolutely fucking arseholish to them, hasn't he, about his party.
Right, just quickly go through the last two episodes. Episode 5, it's called Breakfast Television.
Part 1 and Part 2,
this one's a two-parter. So Richie Rich gets a job to read the newspaper headlines on breakfast television with Anne Diamond. They go out on a drunken night before.
Up in Liverpool and Southampton.
Yeah, and then they've got 10 minutes left to yet somehow manage to get there. This episode has my favourite bit I've said in the podcast before, the Trivial Pursuit bit. If you're going to watch just one bit of Catflap, it's basically bottom. You can see and hear Richie and Eddie, Hitler and Richard throughout that scene. It's incredible.
Well, as you've touched upon it before, talking about boredom and it's the most Godot-esque episode, isn't it? Because they're not allowed to go out at this point. They're trying not to go out for a drink. So what can they do? They're going to play Trivial Pursuit and try and entertain themselves that way. And Richie Rich shines in this bit as being very Richie.
Yeah, what are you doing? No, I said I knew that. Mark my point down. Mark my point, Richie. I'm going to smash you in the face.
Eddie's every bit as frustrated as Eddie Hitler is with Richard when they're playing chess.
Yes,
in
a lot of that.
It is the most bottomy bit of Catflap, I would say.
Episode 5 ends with them getting their bums out on breakfast television, which then has a to be continued
in front of Anne Diamond.
She is brilliant in it, isn't she?
Yes, I'm lovely. That the judge is played by the actor who has it's his daughter's birthday and has 3 bottles of champagne he buys from the shop.
He's a
in
doctor.
Yes.
Now, off, and he plays the
Yeah.
judge brilliantly.
So that episode, so last episode called Smear Campaign, where Richie and Eddie are left alone because Filthy, defending them in court, then gets sentenced to death for some weird reason. And then they become journalists.
I love that. He gets them off, and then for his reward, the judge, played, as you say, by the guy who played the doctor in Bottom, who has the wonderful, best enunciation that you'd want from a judge.
It's like the line within the world of the scripts, Eddie says, like, oh, he's milking this, isn't it? It's meant to say, like, shut up, floppy pants. And he said, well, I went to RADA, I'm ad-libbing or something.
Yeah. And now I think it's time for a word from our sponsor.
Junior's finding his feet, but his bottom's finding the floor. I know. All right, matey? Ooh, he's off again.
Andrex is Andrex Soft and Andrex Thick.
Mind you, he's only got 2 legs.
Andrex, looking out for the family.
There's one other line that really stuck out to me. I think it's episode 1 for the rewatch. Really tickled me when they go and read a bit of Shakespeare. And Richie says, like, oh, got this. What's this one? This one. Okay. Romeo and Juliet. The excitement of and Juliet. Wow, we're in for a treat. Both of them.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of wordplay around like names. I mean, the mid-year is one of the best ones. And you know that has more than likely come from Ben Elton, hasn't it? Don't you think? But they have so much fun with taking the piss out of like. And when he turns up, like I've never really like taken much notice of mid-year.
Yeah.
But he does well as well. I think because when people are often cast to play themselves, they can end up fairly wooden, can't they? And I think Anne Diamond.
We're looking at you, Nolans.
Well, they did what they were there to do. Yeah, they didn't have that many lines, did they, between them, really?
Do you think them coming on at the end and singing meant that Paul Jackson got an extra day in the studio and a bit more money?
Potentially.
Because that's his trick from the Young Ones, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Who knows what else he got out of them? But I think It's a question.
Or into them.
Or into them. Oh, the Nolans and the Nolans has always been a thing that I've associated with Richie.
Obviously, time ravages us all, and we're used to seeing them on things like Loose Women now. But back then, they were really lovely, weren't they?
Oh God, wow. The Nolan sisters.
My 4 tissue treat, or whatever it was that he says.
Yeah, I mean, which,
by the way,
one for each Nolan.
That's he says that. I think my 4 tissue treat, and then you can hear there's a laugh, and then an audible groan from a woman in the audience.
The one woman in the audience.
I don't think it's about the number of Nolans there are. I think it's how many wanks he's had.
Well, yeah, but I assume it's like 1 wank per system. It only went out once in 1987, and I don't believe it was ever repeated again.
That's the lore of it. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
It said that Rik took it sort of quite hard, and apparently was rumoured to have been to have considered leaving show business. But at the same time, I think when you guys went to see Ben Elton at the Slapstick Fest, didn't he say something like Rik would sort of make him come round and they'd drink whiskey and watch it?
Yeah. That's the thing, and that is another reason why I'd love to ask Ben, like, exactly what point in their friendship was it that was happening? Because the way he spoke about it at Slapstick Festival was actually more like in the later years of them being friends. Rik would say, "Should we put on Catflap?" That's how he talked about it, but he didn't specify. And it is really interesting that he'd want to put on their work together that wasn't the Young Ones.
Yeah.
And that's why I do wonder what the motivation was there, other than that obviously Rik must have liked watching his portrayal of Richie Rich, because it is a lot of fun, and the different costumes, the different like plot lines, everything in Catflap is so over the top, isn't it? It's a lot of fun to watch, but I do think
it's like a step higher than the Young Ones.
Exactly. What we haven't hit upon and actually said, we've talked around it, I think, is that it's just not a relatable plot, is it? It's not relatable to most people who are watching. We can all be aware of like a horrible agent. We can all be aware of a grandiose, overinflated ego that is Richie Rich. And, we're aware of what a minder does as a job for that person, right? But it makes no sense that he's actually still employing this guy if he's got no money. If he treats him that much like shit, why is he still paying him, keeping him? And it is that we don't necessarily just get what it is that we're meant to be laughing at in it. I think there's a satire of light entertainment, but
all the skewering of Tarby and Brucey and all this stuff.
It doesn't go all the way into sticking a knife in. It is actually quite sort of, they're quite friendly about it. It's that he wants to be part of that.
Do you think because I wonder if it's because they got the show and they're writing it, and at this point they've entered this world. and they're probably seeing these people in the BBC bar, and there might have been an element of maybe this came from the producer. I don't know. Maybe we can ask Paul Jackson next time we see him, right? Because he's a good friend of ours.
Of course, next time we see him,
But I wonder if there was ever a thing of like, oh, can we rein it in a bit just because they're all right? These guys, we see them in the BBC bar and they're okay. We don't want to be too mean to them.
Well, because I think a lot of at the time, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think actually there was a lot of backlash and people thought it was a real attack. And I think Ben did touch upon it. He was like, it was never meant to be an attack. We were actually trying to be fairly affectionate in the same way The Good Life got, lambasted in The Young Ones. It wasn't that they hated The Good Life. It was just that Vivian would hate that show.
Because Rik went and appeared on Cannon and Ball and stuff, didn't he? It's not like it was like a thing of like, we hate you guys, we'd never do anything. I think if if they'd been another series, they probably would have said, let's get Tarby on to play a version of himself.
And it is great that they have real life stars in the show, but in a way that extras, obviously I don't want to talk too much about Ricky Gervais and his work, but extras is brilliant because again, the dynamic of, because he's an extra, he's not got the status next to these famous people, has he? So it works entirely, that show, in terms of you're seeing it through the lens of, oh, I'm an ordinary person surrounded by all these people.
But doesn't he get famous at the end of series 1?
By the end of it, yeah. And that's when it gets shit, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's 2 series and a special. That's what they did.
Yeah. And I don't really like extras once he gets the commission for his sitcom and all that kind of thing. I don't think.
Then it just feels like a device show, doesn't it? More too biographical.
Yeah, there's still moments in it that are great, but anyway, we're not here to talk about extras. But
speaking of extras, there's a fucking great gag in this where you see a newspaper boy holding a newspaper, but extra, I'm an extra.
And that's pure Ben Elton, isn't it? It's like there's so many really rich, wonderfully written lines in Catflap, and Richie Rich is a character that on paper, I'm sure, absolutely sang. When Rik performed it in the room, I'm sure the audience really loved watching. There's loads of people who do still want to rewatch and enjoy him as a character. But what do you guys think? Like, what in terms of Rik, top 10, top 20 characters, where does Richie Rich fall for you?
Right down the bottom.
He's not in top 10 at all. I mean, I think as now looking at it as a historical piece, it's an interesting transitional piece between the Young Ones and Bottom, where, as you said, Ange, Rik throws himself into it, gives it his all. So, Ade and Nigel are great in it. Nigel really, gets to sort of stretch his acting muscles after playing Neil. It's got so much potential and it's got, as you said, good bits, but those bits don't add up to more than the sum of their parts.
We should recognise, though, that without that journey that they went on with this show, they probably wouldn't have arrived at Bottom. So we have to love and appreciate Catflap, and we do. It's just that we're trying to figure out in this series, the different characters Rik played. We're not here to rate them necessarily.
Ben Elton liked structure and satire. Ade and Rik seem to like a bit more sort of violence and absurdism. And in this show, you don't really get the mixture of them working that well.
But I actually don't think Catflap's that well structured. Okay. I think it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the first draft of Catflap was something really tight and structured that Ben Elton handed in, and then Rik and Ade went, I want to change it. And then Rik goes, kill more milkmen.
There could have been a little bit of that, too many cooks, but potentially. But I do think that they were just trying to cram in far too many ideas.
Yeah.
And I think it suffers for that. I really do. Whereas Bottom, I know they joked about there's no plot this week, but actually there's a really simple plot in every episode of Bottom. And it's not necessarily simple as in it hasn't taken much time to think about. They've really thought through the beginning, middle, end.
It's relatable.
What it is that Richie and Ade are going to do, how that's going to raise the stakes, what that then leads to. The other characters that come in all make sense and they add to the humour. Whereas a lot of the characters on the peripheral in Catflap are kind of not really needed, or they don't add.
They pop up to say one line or to be punched and then leave. Yeah.
They distract.
The head of the BBC, that Bernard Manning-looking guy that's played by
Mel Smith.
Yeah.
Jumbo Whiffy.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. I mean, that belly they put on him and everything.
You old bugger.
And again, I loved that bit. I wanted to say it's a bit Godot, that insults that go back and forth, isn't it? But also, just that Richie Rich doesn't, and that's very Rich. He doesn't really know how to join in. So what's he call him, a foreskin?
Yes. So she's got, see my secretary, lovely pair of eyes, hers. Yes, and her jugs were good too, weren't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you can see that with Richie when he's on the blankety blankest game show, and they do the I never impress girls as I've only got a tiny, and when he just yells penis.
Yes, you completely misunderstood every element of the show. That's fantastically. But he fucks that.
I mean, so we haven't asked the question, what do you think Richie, as in Richard, do you think he'd get on well with Richie Rich?
No, I think this is, as we said, the most unlikable of Rik's characters. I think there's, what do we call them? Richie and Richie. So Rich.
He's Richie Rich, isn't he?
So right, Richard Rich wouldn't.
Rich.
Yeah, and that's.
Or are you talking about Richard Rich?
Fucking hell! See, it's so confusing. There's one bit when he's referred to as Richard Rich, I think, by the judge as well, and that sounds jarring as well. It's like, no, it's Richard. Oh yeah, it's another show. No, I don't think either would like the other. Well, because Richie Rich doesn't like the working class.
Yeah, but let's hypothesize, because Richie, whenever he meets anyone who has some kind of status and who might be famous and who might actually get him somewhere, might actually want to be friends with someone like Richie Rich. I'm just putting it out there. And because they both talk utter bollocks, like they might actually just have a pint in the pub. And Rich, I think actually Richard would out twat, as in talk bollocks, to Richie Rich. Richie Rich would just want to talk about himself, whereas Richard can go off on all kinds of tangents about any number of topics, right?
He would, but Richie Rich wouldn't be listening. But he wouldn't care because he's just got he'd be there in his own head anyway. Right. And Richard would just still be talking, and there'd be two lonely guys together.
I don't think they'd necessarily hate each other, is what I hypothesize. I don't know.
Here's a question: both of them go off on flights of fancy and talking utter bollock. Do both of them deep down believe these lies, or are they knowing they're lying?
Rich believes them. Richard doesn't believe them.
Okay. Do you think Richie Rich genuinely believes he was hanging out with Tarby at one point?
I think he genuinely believes he's got the talent and should be on all TV shows.
Yeah, but he's name drops like, oh, we were chatting about this, me and Brucey with such and such.
But I think he actually, if you look at, because he's had a 10-year career, Richie Rich. That's the premise at one point. They sort of say, I've been in the biz 10 years, and this is where I am. I actually believe him. I actually think he has met all these people on different shows, and then he's fucked it up for himself. Yeah. And he must have a reputation in the business as being, do not hire this man. He's got Filthy as his agent, avoid him like the plague, right? He's fucked it for himself. But that isn't something that they really explore in it. And I think that would be the vein that would have had much more comedic energy to it, wouldn't it? If they'd actually addressed how much. I mean, they do it on the sounds a bit rude, where he's just ruining it all on the camera. And then, he's meant to be reading the papers and he turns up drunk. And all of those bits are brilliant, aren't they? The idea that he can't help but fuck himself in the arse. And it's usually Eddie.
In the arse.
It's usually Eddie. Especially with the going and getting drunk, it's Eddie who ruins that for him, isn't it? And that is a brilliant comedy premise for the plot. Like the idea that he's taken him out to get pissed when it's his biggest, most important job that he's got in years.
They could just have a drink at home, couldn't they? But no, they have to go out. Do you think that when he said, I've been in the business 10 years, it's a similar thing to, right, there was a stand-up I saw just in the open mic circuit, one of the best opening lines I've ever heard. So like, this is my 10-year anniversary of starting stand-up comedy. Welcome to my second gig. So he's been in 10 years. Like, he worked 10 years ago.
Yeah, but he's been resting for 9 years and 11 months. Yeah.
But this is what doesn't quite add up about Richie Rich. He's got this apartment. He's got an agent. He's got a minder. He's got all the things around him that actually serve the fact that he's famous. But when he bumps into the layperson in the street, they have no fucking clue who he is. What is the truth of Richie Rich?
He's either got a rich relative or he's just racked up a lot of credit card debt.
I think the idea that Ben's written is that he is a has-been and he was once, someone who was paid a fair bit of money, and Ralphie took him on because, he's good. And there's one line where it's like, even when I was on unemployment benefit, he took 75%, absolutely brilliantly observed things between agents. But again, it's just not particularly, we can laugh at that because that's clearly just hilarious. But you don't have to relate to it to find it funny, but there are certain bits with Richie Rich that you just, just don't land. So I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but it's because it upsets me.
The character is performing hell of a lot, right? Putting on a front and stuff. Is there a single moment where he drops that and he's his real self in the show?
There's no sincerity.
I didn't think so either.
No,
I think when he realises, why don't I just kill my own dad? I think that's pure just Rich. Like, he is a horrible person. I think in that moment, he is just like, okay, let's kill my own dad for my own gain. I think that is real Richie Rich, isn't it? I think he's absolutely believing that he should be this famous star. That end bit where he's smiling and laughing and dancing because he's on the
world's
television.
how it should be, finally.
And he's so happy. That's real Richie Rich. He's a horrible, arrogant, egotistical person, and he wins at the end. So when he does say, "It's me, I've made it," we're meant to kind of be happy and on his side, but I just kind of feel like, no, that isn't how it should end. It should be that he should be on the fucking bottom of the fucking heap, drinking with Eddie and not winning at life.
So that was Richie Rich in Filthy Rich and Catflap, halfway house between Rik from the Young Ones and Richard in Bottom, written by Ben Elton, performed by 3 of the Young Ones, and worth watching, I think, definitely.
Oh, yeah, if anyone out there has listened to this and you hadn't given Catflap a go, please don't let any of our negativity stop you from watching it, because I feel like we have been fairly negative on this one. In a way, we haven't been on any of Rik's of the characters.
What's wrong with Series 3 of Bottom? Come on, it's the best one.
Again,
But
you're right.
we all have to be true to our own opinions. We've said that, and there's no point in us coming on here and saying things we don't believe, right?
Sorry, Jeffers, sorry.
And
Yeah,
also, there's also a hell of a lot of politics in this one, more so than
But that's
the
not
Young
to his
Ones.
detriment. That's not any reason
No,
why I
it's not.
dislike.
But there's a lot of
watching-
times we get pushback from people saying, "Oh, why are you bringing politics into Bottom and stuff? It's in their work. You just need to look for it." This one, it seemed a bit more
Yeah, well,
there, front and centre.
good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ben Elton. Whoops, bit of politics there.
Right,
Yeah.
I think it's time for a Filthy Rich and Catflap quiz.
Oh, I know the character's so little, I can't think of a buzzer noise. Psst, okay, I'll say, "You've killed a milkman."
I'm just going to go with Tarby.
Tarby.
Oh, that's a better one.
All right, okay, here we go. In the first episode, the milkman always rings twice. How many
You've killed a milkman.
How many milkmen die?
4.
Oh, wait, sorry,
Killed a milkman.
that was your thing?
Yeah.
Is the right answer? It is 4.
You said it on the podcast, so there we go.
Okay. All right. Okay, second question. How does each one die?
You've killed a milkman. A milk bottle smashed around the head, a meat cleaver in the head, and then 2 run over by a milk float.
That's
Mhm.
correct. That is the right
Yeah.
answer. Okay. In another episode, which I am not going to say which it was because I can't remember which one it is, when Richie tells Eddie to stop sighing, what does Eddie say he's actually doing?
You've killed a milkman. I'm just slowly bringing in phlegm to then gob at you later.
Yes, I'm
Um,
idly collecting phlegm
yeah.
at the back of my throat, and that when I've collected enough, I'm going to
gonna
gob it
gob
at
it,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I did
okay.
know that one.
All right. What is the name of the host of Ooh, Sounds a Bit Rude?
Tarby. It's not that. Oh, God, I do know this at the back of my mind somewhere. No, I've just got Jumbo Whiffy in my head and it's not that.
Matt?
Something
Okay.
Cribbins? No, that's...
No, it's
Oh,
go on.
it's something.
Go on.
Oh,
Behind.
it's so in my
I'll
head.
take a late answer.
Oh, God, it's something like Bend Over, but it's not that.
It's something like that, but it's not that. It is a pun. It's played by one of the ones that the larger one of Hale and Pace, playing Ivor Whopper.
Ivor Whopper!
Let's move over to Ivor,
Yes,
darling.
I
All
know
that.
that.
yeah.
Okay, next question. What, again, this is in an episode, I'm not going to specify what. What disease does Eddie warn Richie that Ralph has
You've
when...
killed a milkman.
Go on.
Herpes.
It's not, sorry. This is
Can you finish the
when
question?
Ralph tells Richie, what's mine is yours.
Yeah, I thought it was herpes.
It's not herpes. Ange, do you want to try?
Syphilis.
Is the right answer.
Yeah,
That's
I thought so.
3-1.
Okay.
Okay. Right. In another episode, who plays an art critic who
You've killed a milkman.
Tarby.
Matt was first there, I think.
Uh-huh.
Go on.
So Stephen Fry.
Is the correct answer. Yes. played by
Yeah,
Steve Fry.
Bufati.
Yes. In the same episode, a young comedian bids on one of Eddie's pieces of work.
You've killed a milkman. Ben Elton.
So I'll complete the question now. With Ben Elton stood behind him. Which comedian?
David Baddiel.
Correct. Okay, so I think we're on 4-2. Okay. Filthy represents Richie and Eddie in court and gets them off, but what does the judge decide will happen to him?
Tarby.
You've killed
Ange.
a milkman.
He will die by death by hanging.
That is the correct
Puts
answer.
a black cap on as well.
Yeah.
Like it's so similar to Alan
Hanging's
Bastar's.
I love that
yeah.
hanging's been brought back in as
Yeah.
well. It was
Okay.
a hot topic in the 80s.
Right, this is close. So it's 4-3 at the moment, right? With 2 questions left. Okay, here we go. How does Ralph survive his
You've
execution?
killed a milkman
Matt.
by putting a bit of lead piping into his throat. Is what he says, but it's actually a safety harness.
Is the correct answer.
Bastard.
Very good. Yeah, I
Okay.
thought he was going down the wrong route there with the lead piping. Yeah, okay. Yes, he reveals the safety harness, thus showing the artifice of the fact that it is, in fact, a TV program that they're doing. And finally, so it's 5-3. So Matt's got it, but I'll do the last question anyway. Okay. How does Richie finally become the most famous person on
Toby.
TV?
Killed him all.
Ash.
He slanders everybody else in the entertainment industry, and he's the only one left.
Exactly. He's seen as the
Yeah.
only person, the only safe pair of hands left.
Do you know, that reminds me of Blackadder with the old crone giving Blackadder the solutions to what he can do to stay the
Give
bod. Everyone
everybody-
else.
The whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
and
we
they
go.
do it in Bottom as well, don't they? When it's sort of like, oh, only if you kill everyone else in the entire world, she might sleep with you. That's going to work.
Well, congratulations, Matt. You win this week. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
And thank you very much for listening. That was us on Filthy Rich and Catflap. We are here at Talking Bottom. You can follow us on social media and reach out to us at 11mafekkingparade@gmail.com.
And do you know what? Give Catflapo Podcasto a listen to as well if you're into Catflap, because I don't know if we're going to talk about it anymore. He goes on about it a lot more detail with a lot more love and
absolutely,
affection, and he's a great guy.
He's dug into the history of it, talked to the cast and crew and everyone who's, interesting to talk about on it. And it's a great podcast. But I also wanted to say, we didn't really go into Lee Corns' part as the bin man that much in depth. But that's partly because we're going to be interviewing Lee Corns at the Edinburgh Fringe at the end of August.
Smooth.
So the questions we're going to have for Lee around his lovely role as a bin man who's completely nonplussed by all of the dead milkmen around him.
Yes, it's not the reason he doesn't take the bin, the dead body is because he's not in a refuse bag. That's the only reason.
Very, very bin man-like. So he plays
been a
that
good question.
brilliantly. Lee Corns is, of course, also Dickhead in Bottom, and we are going to interview him live in front of, we hope, a thronging audience at the Edinburgh Fringe.
What audience?
A thronging audience. Throbbing
So
audience.
if you're a comedy fan and you're in Edinburgh on August 24th, Lee Corns not only has been in Blackadder and Bottom and Red Dwarf and Colin Sandwich and the Young Ones, he's
And Catflap.
and Catflap. He's been in. Come on.
And Grange Hill.
Someone who's been in all of those comedies, right? And who was there instrumental on the first night of the Comedy Store opening, was one of the first acts on, and went on to be a compere in the Comedy Store.
He is the comedian that Sean Locke credits for inspiring him to get up on stage and do stand-up.
That's cool.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Because Sean Locke, I don't think was that much younger than Lee. Like at the time, he would have been watching him in the crowd at Comedy Store, and he credits him as one of the comedians that inspired his more kind of surreal take, going on, because Lee in stand-up went off on all kinds of amazing tangents. He's got an amazing.
He does the same bit twice or something, doesn't he? In the first half and the second half, he told us about in his one interview. And then some people who were too drunk, like, how embarrassing he's
goading
done on the
people
stage.
to heckle and say, we've already seen this. Yeah, exactly. He had real fun with the crowd, and he's going to have fun with the crowd and us at the end of August. Well, I say the end, it's the 24th. It's the final Sunday of the Fringe. So go to Underbelly, their website, or you can look it up on our socials. We've got a link in our link tree. You can book tickets there. If you aren't in Edinburgh on that day, we're sorry that you can't come and join us. We'll, of course, be recording it and then putting it out afterwards. But do come and join us in person, in the room. I think Lee will potentially sign a book for you. We're going to have a few copies of the book left, we hope.
And speaking of
he'll
that,
sign your tits. He'll do whatever you want. We're talking for him.
Lee actually took back on the mantle of Dickhead recently in a couple of little videos he did for us to promote our book, Talking Bottom, A Guide to the Cult Sitcom, which, when this podcast goes out, might be in print or might not, depending on the fucking publisher. So who knows? But if you're listening to this right now, have a look on Amazon, and if it's not there, hopefully we'll be with another publisher soon.
We should give an update that basically, just briefly, because this is going out obviously after we've launched our book, and we don't quite know what's happening, other than the fact that we sold out on the day of our launch. We sold out. The book is now no longer actually available to buy on Amazon or any of your good book retailers. Basically, we're fully aware at the moment. Hopefully all of our backers would have got their books. That's what we're talking to Unbound about as we speak, because some of them haven't been distributed. We thank everyone for their patience. If you are still waiting when this goes out, we can only apologise, and we are going to do our utmost to make sure every backer gets their hands on a book. We have been assured that all of those books exist. It's not that they didn't print enough. So we're just in talks at the moment. So we will update you as soon as we can. And thank you to everyone who has read it and been able to review it so far on Amazon. We've had some really lovely comments on socials. People, obviously taking photos of the book. If you do have your book, or you got a tea towel, you want to tag us at Talking Bottom on socials, please do. We love seeing all of these things coming in after all of our work on the book. It's so nice to see that people have actually enjoyed it. The main thing for us would be to do it on Amazon, because that's where a lot of people go to decide whether they want to buy a book these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's also our email address, 11mafekkingparade@gmail.com, if you wish. and also all our socials at Talking Bottom.
Slide into our DMs. Book
Yeah.
tickets for Fringe. We'd love to meet you all there. And thanks very much for listening, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed our breakdown of Richie Rich. We'll be doing another of the many faces of Rik Mayall next week. Join us, please do.
See you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.